approximately 5'9 3/4", with skin the color of Devonshire cream, and the sort of eyes that stare directly into one's soul with neither artifice nor evasion. Okay, so I'm going to try to explain my Frasier fan theory about Daphne and Niles and the nature of their relationship. Um, Ostensibly, the way you're meant to interpret this in the series is that um, Daphne is totally unaware of how attracted Niles is to her, and that all these things she does to flirt with him and so forth are entirely accidental, and you know, um, she's unaware of the effect that she has on him. What I'm going to try to prove with references to the series is that actually she is aware of how smitten Niles is with her, and she's doing all this stuff intentionally. And basically, that she's in love with Niles, and they're basically aware of each other's feelings, but they just have this guise of ignorance because of the impossibility of their relationship due to Niles' ongoing marriage, which he's invested in. So, just to start off, some things about Daphne's character. She's very emotionally intelligent. She has a high degree of interpersonal intelligence, which is like basically intuitive. An example of this is in the first season, Frasier's father, Martin, is flirting with this woman, and Martin, he's reluctant to engage in a relationship with her, and Frasier can't figure out for the life of him why. But Daphne understands immediately and intuitively that the reason is Martin's insecurity about his cane and um, his hip injury and his infirmity in that way. And the way she communicates it to Martin and allows him to reach this realization is very done very tactfully, without acknowledging openly that she knows this about him, without humiliating him with her explicit knowledge of his vulnerability in that way. So that's an example of her intuitive emotional intelligence and her tact. Also, it's mentioned that she grew up with 8 brothers and that she has a deep understanding of male sexual attraction and how men are in general. And she's very worldly in that way, and able to deal with men in that way and understand their intentions and stuff. A reference from the series about Daphne's character. In the 4th season, she says to Niles that she would never get involved with someone who's separated, as in like not divorced yet. And she tells Niles, as long as you still have feelings for Maris, you can't get involved in another relationship. And Niles does indeed have feelings for Maris, like strong feelings, his wife, which we learn in several different ways, but explicitly in the episode Midwinter Night's Dream in the 1st season, which is a pretty crucial episode to this theory, where Niles explains to Daphne that indeed he loves Maris, and he has this whole speech about how love can be very different. It can be, exciting and new, or it can be comfortable. So yeah, that basically is why they cannot be in a relationship. In the last episode of the 1st season, Frasier confronts Niles directly, asking him if he's in love with Daphne, and Niles replies basically that he is, and he says that he doesn't want to leave Maris. He would prefer to stay married to Maris and have an affair with Daphne, he says, which is unconscionable to Daphne. In the episode Midwinter Night's Dream, Frasier accuses Niles and Daphne of having an affair, basically, and Daphne says, how can you accuse your brother of doing something so deplorable? Which is her honest feeling, like that if he were to have an affair with her, it would degrade Niles in her mind to such a degree that she might not even still be attracted to him if he would be willing to do something so deplorable, in her words. A bachelor auction. I've always thought it would be fun to pick a man off the block to do my bidding and fulfill my every desire. Niles? I'd love to. I mean, Frasier? Um, in the third season, there's an episode where Niles rents a bunch of classic films, one of which is Casablanca, and Daphne is commenting on the film, talking about how she says it's the most heartbreaking moment on film when Bogey tells Ingrid Bergman to get on the plane, even though he loves her, so because it's the ethical thing to do. Like for the war, like he has to sacrifice his love for in order for this higher ethical purpose, which is basically the situation that she perceives her and Niles to be in, which is that they have this deep, great love, but they have to sacrifice it because it would be totally unethical and immoral for them to pursue it. Um, I'm no stranger to that feeling myself. It can strike without warning, and you don't know who it will be. Why, you could be standing next to a person month after month, and the next thing you know, you're tearing each other's clothes off. So Daphne's always like saying these things that are obviously innuendos to Niles, and this combined with the knowledge of her tact and her emotional intelligence, her interpersonal intelligence, and her communication skills, her like uncanny British tact and communication ability. Um, it's obvious that she's doing this stuff on purpose, all these innuendos and stuff, and so basically, you could say that her flirting with Niles takes, I think, like about 3 different forms, which is like, um, so she'll make all these innuendos, and also she'll put herself in physically provocative positions around Niles, and additionally, sometimes they're just mutually flirting together openly. Like, for example, early on in the first season, they both come out from Frasier's bedroom and their like clothes are all ruffled. And it appears as though they've just had sex. Um, Additionally, in the first season, there's a moment where Niles accidentally drops a necklace down Daphne's blouse, and they're like looking for it, and they're like basically like romping with each other. Um, the most explicit example of this type of mutual open flirtation is early on in the first or second season. Frasier comes into the apartment, and Daphne's wearing this like small cocktail dress, and it's revealed that Daphne's been trying on dresses to model them for Niles, um, under the guise of them being birthday presents for Maris. And a lot of these mutual flirtation things revolve around things that are presents for Niles' wife Maris. Additionally, sometimes Daphne will do things to try to provoke Niles to try to impress her. Like she'll make remarks that she likes manly men, and like try to get Niles to uh, be manly, even though he's just like it's anathema to him, just for her amusement and for her gratification. There's even another example of this where she remarks that she found her brothers very masculine when they would go fishing, and she says this in order to manipulate Niles into going on a fishing trip with Martin, his father. So that is pretty clear evidence that she is aware of Niles' attraction to her, because she uses his attraction to manipulate his behavior in a way that she feels is for the best for their Niles and Martin's family relationship. There's more clear evidence of the acknowledgement of this. Early on in the first season, Frasier remarks to his father Martin that he says, "You know how Niles feels about her," and this is before Niles has acknowledged any of his feelings to anybody about Daphne. It's just patently obvious that Niles is smitten with Daphne, and even the blundering fool Frasier can sense this. So obviously, Daphne, who's more emotionally intelligent than Frasier, will be able to know it too. And probably the most explicit acknowledgement is in the episode 23 of the first season, Frasier has like the flu or something. He's like he has like a fever and he's highly medicated. And Daphne is talking to him, and basically the pertinent quote is that Frasier says, "You're probably in league with Niles. I know about the two of you. Oh, you pretend not to know, but you know." So this is very important because it's an in-universe acknowledgement that this is a possibility, like that it's acknowledged, that it's just flipping obvious that that Niles has this strong attraction to Daphne. Um, like if we go to that scenario of two characters whispering 2 feet from another character who's presumably meant not to be able to hear them, this is like an in-universe acknowledgement that it's a possibility that that person 2 feet away can hear them. So, yeah. Another very obvious example of Daphne flirting with Niles is at one point, Niles comes into the apartment and only Daphne is there, and she's waiting by the door with like this sundress, and the back is unzipped, and she's petitioning Niles to zip her up, and she says, "Don't be afraid to grab hold and give it all you've got." And like, why would she be? She knows Niles is coming over, but she feigns ignorance, like, "Oops, like you caught me with my dress unzipped," like. But obviously she knew he's coming over. So why would she be there? And why did she phrase it like that? Like, when you take all this into account with her character, her like weird, uncanny British communication abilities, like she wouldn't be making these kind of innuendos unintentionally. Yeah. "It's just so nice to be with a man you feel so comfortable with. I feel very close to you." In the episode from season 3 called Moon Dance, which I think is also another crucial episode to this fan theory, Daphne teaches Niles to dance and they go ballroom dancing. And while they're dancing, Daphne encourages Niles to proclaim his love for her, which he does, and then she reciprocates. And then they sit down and she says, "We fooled them," and she tactfully looks away right after she says that to allow his shocked expression, like to not betray his, feelings. And then later in season 4, she tells Niles that she loves him, just explicitly, and he reciprocates. Presume they're, um, as friends, but really they are romantically in love. No can do, fish and chips. In season 2, there's an episode where the Crane Boys attempt to open a restaurant, and in the course of events, Daphne kills an eel to cook it, by just brutally and efficiently slamming it on the counter, as you are meant to do. And this causes Niles to admire her. And throughout the series, there are many explanations and examples of why why Niles admires Daphne, and the things that he likes about her, and he has various speeches about, and and the nature of his attraction to her is well explicated. In terms of why Daphne loves Niles, it's not necessarily as clear. At one point, she makes a statement about the unconditional love that a dog has for humans, and how this is something that she finds very intriguing. So that presumably is a reference to Niles. I think what Daphne really loves about Niles is how Niles sees her. That Niles is able to have this deep and profound understanding of Daphne in ways that other people are not. And I think this is essentially, this may be a little bit controversial, but essentially the female sexual or attraction dynamic is to be looked at, and the male dynamic is to be the viewer. So, like, for example, in my so-called life, I think what that series really shows you is what it feels like to be looked at, to be a woman or a young woman, girl, and to be looked at by men, boys, and stuff. Um, and another thing I wanted to mention is this, like the idea of like a tableau, or like how a television series is not really a plot arc. It's more like the form of a short story. It's just the gestalt. It's just the wholeness of a situation without really a a complete arc. Um, for example, in My So-Called Life, I think you could basically divide that series into two parts. The first part ends in the episode when Angela and Jordan have their first kiss, and that scene when she gets out of the car and it plays that music and she's spinning around, and that's basically the tableau, is just this situation that she's in, and it doesn't really need resolution. And when they do resolve it, it not quite as good, even though it is pretty good. But um, so in terms of Frasier, I see it as the tableau is just, it basically is encapsulated in the first season, and then they just have to extend it the more they keep getting, renewed. And that's basically the nature of television shows. Like they write one season, and that one first season contains the gestalt of the series, which is like the form of a short story in one season. And then they try to extend it, and they'll a lot of times try to resolve it or have character growth, and that never ends up well, basically, because it's not meant to resolve like that. For example, the fact that in the first season of Frasier, Martin's old cop bar that he used to go to and all his buddies are at is closed in the first season. It's like, why would they close that in the very first season? Well, it's because that's part of just this quintessential, just the story, like the picture. It's like a photograph, a tableau, it's like a painting of a situation. It's not a story like a novel or like a movie. It's just like, here's a thing that happened and here's the truth of that in a form of a narrative. And so in terms of Daphne and Niles, the tableau is just the situation as it is, that they're in love with each other and their relationship is impossible. And so as the series progresses into the fifth and sixth and later seasons, the situation develops in ways that I don't feel are really necessarily natural or necessary to the original intention. But I really feel that this theory that I have is the original intention and the correct reading of the series from the intention of the writers and from the effects of what's on screen when you watch it. Like, if you watch it with this in mind, it all just makes a lot more sense. Or like, for example, Jim and Pam in The Office. Like, if you watch the real Office, the UK The Office, they don't even I forget their names, like Tim and can't remember her name in the UK The Office, but they don't get together in the first season. They only actually hook up in the Christmas special after the first season. So, and in the US The Office, when the series starts to get really bad after they hook up, after they resolve this tableau. So, or like Ross and Rachel, it really goes off the rails after they get together, and the gestalt of that series is contained in the parts preceding the resolution of their relationship in that way. So back to Frasier. Like, within the explicit reading, we're not really given many reasons or justifications for Daphne's attraction to Niles, which furthers the explicit reading that Daphne is not attracted to Niles, and that she would not be aware of his attraction to her because of how like uninterested she is in him romantically. But he does have some reasons given for his attractiveness, or for why he would be attractive to people, presumably. For example, there's an episode where Frasier has this kind of dawning new degree of awareness about his mortality, and he decides to make up his will and divvy up all his possessions and stuff. And like, there's this African mask, and Martin says to Niles, "You can have it," and Niles says, "I don't want it." So that's one example of why Niles is attractive, is because he has better taste than Frasier. Like Frasier has all this awful art in his apartment, like this Jack Otterson vase painting. That's the one that's most frequently framed in the back of shots. It's like, it looks like lollipop, or it looks like candy or something. It's like these vases. They're black and white, checkered. It's not a terrible painting, really, but it just is an expression of Frasier's bombasticness, his like overblown ego and self-aggrandizement, and lack of self-awareness. And you also see a Rauschenberg in Frasier's apartment. And in the very later seasons, you see a Chihuly vase, which is actually like a very nice piece, but I don't think that's really a representation of Frasier's taste. It's just a reference to Seattle, and like, because Chihuly's from Tacoma, I think. So, and the worst, most egregious stuff in Frasier's apartment is all his African knickknacks. Like in the very first episode, I think, Daphne says, "I'll just go back into the loo and enjoy more of your erotic African art." Like his just utterly distasteful, like, it's kind of like his like jazz. Like, if you don't know, Kelsey Grammer sings the theme song, like, "Toss salads and scram." Like, the whole, like, the thing of like a white dude is like, "I'm so cool and like in touch that I like to just let loose and play jazz and, collect African art because I'm just open to sexuality and, like, ooh." And so, yeah, but Niles, like, you see some of the art in his practice, his like psychiatric practice in his office, and it's just a lot better. His taste is just better in general, because I think of self-awareness, and his self-awareness is shown also through like the jokes he makes. Like, he's always making these running gags about these workshops he's leading and how he exemplifies like the worst qualities of like his fear of intimacy workshop. He had to cut it off because they were getting too close, and like, he's always, you could say like, oh, he's just an idiot, but I think the true reading of these jokes is their self-aware, self-deprecating humor. And that's the difference between Niles and Frasier, is that like Niles' degree of self-awareness, and he is an elitist, but he's not like a self-congratulatory snob like Frasier is. And it's basically like the good son and the bad son, and then Martin is the father, and and Eddie is like the super ego or something. I don't know, but yeah. So those are some of the reasons why Daphne would be attracted to Niles. But more so, I think it is this thing of like object and subject, and that people have a wrong understanding of what it means to be sexually objectified. Like, they think it means you're talking about an inanimate object. Really, it means you're the object of affection. Like, you're being looked at, as I said. The women are looked at, and men is like the male gaze, and the woman is gazed at. And really, in a sense, you could even say that the woman is in the more active position in this sense, because it's really about looking at the woman as a human being, not as a inanimate object. And that's, in this series, explicated in how how thoroughly explained Niles' attraction to Daphne is, and how the nature of Daphne's attraction to Niles is in Niles' ability to see Daphne in this light. If you think about it, Frasier, he's incapable of making a real connection with a woman, because he's such an egoist. And there's never really a sincere romantic plotline involving Frasier in the series that comes to the level of Niles and Daphne. The closest thing is he has this like flirtation with his boss, and then they find out they're incompatible because Frasier's a horrible person and hates animals, which is like how can this guy be the protagonist of the series when he literally hates little cute dogs? It's he's just a buffoon who's there to be the foil, really. Um, Even though that gets kind of mixed up in later seasons. But Frasier basically does see women as inanimate objects. Like he always is making references to women in terms of like possessions and like how he just superficially likes hot blondes, quote unquote, like is just so distasteful and stupid, and like his inability to have a form real connections with women in the way that Niles does with Daphne. Dr. Crane, were you sniffing my hair? Why would I do that? I'm a happily married man. So I think I've pretty well explained what I'm talking about to the limit of my ability, and I'm basically just rambling at this point. But I wanted to add a couple little bonus things. Um, this is not really a theory per se. It's just kind of a way to look at the series, or just a little aside is that I always wished that Niles and Roz had hooked up at one point sexually, because there's this sexual tension between them. Um like in the first season there's an episode where they're at the cafe and Roz is interacting with Niles and Frasier, and Roz puts on lipstick and then kisses a napkin to blot it, and then she takes the napkin from Niles, kisses it to blot her lipstick, and then puts the napkin down back in front of Niles, and um in this very like dismissive, like without acknowledging Niles, but it's like almost like a tacit implicit form of flirtation that, you know, but in like a kind of a confronting way. And then after she does that, Frasier says, she despises you. And Niles says, why should I warrant such strong emotions? I barely acknowledge her existence. And then later, Niles says, she is comely in a sort of back alley way. And at one point, Roz dates this Trekkie guy from the radio station named Noel, who's like this nerd and similar to Niles in some ways, but like even less attractive really than Niles, in his like inaptitude and low status. And at different points, Roz makes it known that she has genuine attraction to men of wealth and status, not in like the sense of like a gold digger, but just in a sense of true innate attraction to men who have status and wealth, which Niles has. Like, so it makes sense that they have attraction to each other. And the way that Niles is always ribbing Roz about like her promiscuity, which if you think about it for 2 seconds, like, it seems like he wants to sleep with her. He's constantly talking about that. And at one point, there's an episode where Niles is without female comfort for a long time, and he becomes extremely desperate, and he actually hits on Roz, and he says, Roz, I never noticed what a perky little walk you have, which is a funny line. So he just explicitly propositions her. And I just always thought it would be funny and like compelling if they had hooked up just like at one point, Niles hooks up with Frasier's ex-wife, Lilith, which is like, if they're going to do that, there's no setup to that. Why not have Niles and Roz hook up? But anyway, and like also at one point, there's Niles and Roz have an interaction where, Niles remarks that Roz is wearing an offbeat jacket, and then Roz intuits that he means cheap, and then Niles is actually impressed that she is able to understand his kind of coded insult, and then Niles is also impressed with the insulting barbs that Roz gives back to him after that. And at another point, Niles remarks that Roz is very savvy, he says. And there's just various things throughout the series where um, they just acknowledge elements of attraction to each other. So there is this tension, and it would have been good, I think, if it were resolved in that way. As a second little bonus, this is, in a sense, a fan theory, but it's not really backed up by any kind of evidence from the series. But just the idea that Daphne's psychic ability is feigned, like she's doing like mentalist techniques to um, get this information through non-supernatural means, and then she pretends that she's had this like psychic flashes and stuff, and that claiming that she's psychic is like a way of this like kind of British way of cloaking her incisive interpersonal intelligence in a guise of disarming kookiness. Like she makes herself seem kooky and like nuts, and that because if she were to just be like, oh, I know, she always knows like everything that is going on. If she were to just make it explicit, like Sun Tzu, like Art of War, or like laws, like laws of power and stuff. You're not. It's just better if for her to cloak it in this guise um of wackiness. So that's just another little fun way to look at the series, is that Daphne's psychic ability is all just her faking it and doing it basically to screw with people. And she does like to screw with people. But yeah, I think I've hopefully I've laid out the relevant facts in a way that if you look at the series with these things in mind, it will become apparent immediately that this is the this is the actual true interpretation. Yeah. Although I don't necessarily recommend watching the whole series because it kind of goes off the rails. Like, just that is, I don't know. But at least the first season, I would say, is pretty good.